Josh Burke here at Landheim, Kip Geyer at Landheim. Oh, Kip, what are we doing here today?
Oh, we're going to talk about all the buzz in the dog training world with the banning of tools, training tools, electric collars for the most part.
Shout out to all the really popular trainers, Michael Ellis, Ivan,
Larry Crone,
Robert Cabral, people that stand up to this stuff on a daily basis. We're just going to kind of throw our 2 cents into the ring. I listened yesterday to Michael Ellis's debate in San Francisco from a few days ago. Just a lot of silliness, in my opinion. Some of the callers, the one caller that called in to talk about the dogs not being able to give consent, and she cited gorillas in zoos having the option of engaging in training or not engaging in training. But we failed to answer the question of whether or not the gorillas consented to being in captivity to begin with. So this whole idea that our dogs need to give us consent for this is silliness.
Yeah, that was one of them that took me off guard. And we wanted to touch on, because we're in the trenches here at Landheim. It's a big facility, roughly 6 trainers. We run 7 days a week. We're set just outside of Chicago. And over the 9 years I've been head trainer here, to say that I've dealt with one serious dog bite a week is just greatly under what we're really seeing. Most of the time it's about one a day. And I can't say that I've ever seen one that I could link to aversive techniques from an electric collar. We do see a steady stream of a pattern. Early spay neuters, no training whatsoever, and tons of unintentional positive reinforcement for the aggressive behaviors. And we don't see anybody talking about this. And we had to say something today about this, because we see it in the real world, not necessarily in a study. And these are huge, huge tragedies. Customers that their dogs have killed, not just their neighbors' dogs, but killed all their neighbors' dogs. I had a dog within the last month, killed all 5 of the neighbors' cats in a day. None of these animals consented to this, and they stuck with that pattern. No training, poor confinement, no discipline whatsoever. And it's kind of hard to know where to start. I've spent my entire adult life, most of it with police dogs, developing some pretty intense aggression. Sometimes it's what we have to do with them. And I've always used positive reinforcement to intentionally build this aggression. Nobody wants to talk about that. We certainly don't use aversive techniques in the police bite work. And I don't think too many of the people, the antis that want to ban these collars and call themselves purely positive trainers, they don't want to talk about people like myself and a lot of others that have spent careers developing intentional aggression using positive reinforcement. It's really the only way I can get it going. And it's powerful stuff.
I would agree. Positive reinforcement is very powerful. We would be labeled balanced trainers here only because we use any and all tools that are disposable to get the job done. However, we're not at all balanced. Our training would weigh far more heavily into positive reinforcement, as I would imagine very many of these trainers who advocate for the proper use of these tools are. They're using positive reinforcement mainly in their training. But why would I take tools out of the toolbox, so to speak, or tie one hand behind my back in an attempt to get this job done? A lot of times we don't talk about this a lot, but some of these people with these problems are on a timeline. If this doesn't get fixed ASAP for some of these people, these aggressive dogs, dangerous dogs, the dog's life is on the line. So that is often what's on the very other side of this training problem, so to speak, trying to correct this. The dog, he'll have no more days here on earth.
That's the biggest pressure that I face, along with the safety of the family and the other animals around these dogs, is that they've, and I'm not exaggerating, before I get these customers, I've often have went to purely positive trainers that literally recommend euthanizing the dog. They won't apply any force, use any aversives, but they'll recommend the ultimate aversive death. Okay, you can call it euthanize, but it's not a good death. The dog certainly wouldn't consent to that. And we generally are able to reward our ways out of these things, but sometimes we do have to put an abrupt stop to this violent behavior when we have dogs in here, up to and including 2 dismemberments in the last few years that we had, and we're able to rehabilitate these dogs and get them to enjoy life and not do that kind of stuff anymore. I do want to touch on here at our kennel, our use of positive reinforcement. In 2022, our staff went through 2,400 pounds of meat, which works out roughly to 1.2 million pieces of individual reward. A lot of the staff, a clicker is only going to last them a couple months because the click leaves them and we have to replace them. We have a cup full of worn out clickers. So this is one thing we never see talked about, is that people that will use and do use electronic collars, and we'll use pinch collars, but we also use massive amounts of food reward. Most of these studies only compare all aversive or all positive, and it makes the whole study pretty skewed then. When we see this, we're always going to be balanced. When I say balanced, we tip the scales hugely towards the positive reinforcers.
I guess looking at what kind of brought us here is this 2021 results of studies by the American Society of Animal Behavior, and this seems to be what continually gets cited by the purely positive crowd or force-free crowd, whatever we want to call ourselves. And don't get me wrong, we're not spreading any ill will towards any purely positive trainer. By all means, if that's the choice, your path, hey, we'll support you however. Just don't try to remove tools from our hands in an emotional reaction based in opinion, largely in opinion. So there is plenty of science out here. We're not citing science, but we have looked, and I know Kip is very well read in a lot of the science using these aversive techniques, and even science behind the negative effects of positive reinforcement only.
That's the one that rears its head the most with us in our real lives, and that unintentional positive reinforcement building this. But when it does come to aversives, we've recognized a pattern with our civilian customers unintentionally giving aversives, not through electronic training. The number one thing that's most often cited as we get into these bite lessons: finger pointing, finger snapping, mean facing, hip posturing. Will continually build aggression in these pet animals until we finally do hit a tipping point. And yet we don't hear any talk about trying to ban silly behavior or informing people that all of these adversarial actions, it's almost like they come in here and it's them against the pet, and they have a horrible relationship. We try to straighten that out through this reward-based training that we do, but yeah, we don't hear anybody talking about that. We get all wrapped up on a tool, and we see it in other emotional debates too, from abortion, gun rights, on and on. People sometimes aren't experts in the category, yet they want something banned. And that's the culture we live in right now.
So we got your operant conditioning chart here in front of us. We got chart.
We've argued more over this thing and talked more about it. The first thing I want to say, B.F. Skinner gets a lot of credit for this, and he did not invent it. I hear B.F. Skinner all the time, and we've all read him, but that's not his quadrant. It was another scientist's quadrant, and we kind of live and die by it, though, even though its construct is maybe fell out of favor on the cutting edge psychologists. It works for us. I can tell you this: no matter how hard you try to stay in positive reinforcement, the moment you've stopped giving that reinforcer, you've left that quadrant. And so pretty tough to stay in that one. And when we touch about this, the biggest thing that we have recognized, or one of the bigger things, is a positive reinforcer when we're using food. My reinforcer is only going to be as strong as the hunger that I'm removing. And if you're going to be a real successful trainer and using a lot of food for positive reinforcement, then you're going to have to deprive the dog occasionally. And I think that's another thing that doesn't get talked about much, the stress that it brings on a dog when we're developing hunger to make our positive reinforcement stronger. I wish all this stuff could be, all gentler and kinder, but sometimes the reality of it is, to get what we need a hungry dog. And I guess since you can't see that, people are real comfortable doing that.
What do you think? There's a lot of science being cited on the side of the American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior about this stuff, but we don't see the studies that talk about the stress involved in withholding of reward from a dog versus positive punishment or negative reinforcement. Many of those studies show far less stress in a dog where we're using positive punishment versus negative punishment, or the withholding of a reward toy or food. This can become far more stressful in the dogs.
Yeah, that's for sure. It depends on how hungry the dog is. But it's funny that's the positive reinforcement for us and a lot of others. It's become the darling of everything, but it comes with some huge responsibilities. How hungry are we going to let this dog get? Dr. Whitney, he did studies on that back in the 1920s, and it's very well known when you pass diminishing returns with hunger, but certainly the dog is feeling some pangs of hunger when we're going to get good learning.
All right, I think we'll wrap up here. If anybody's got any questions or want to post in our video, we'll certainly be open to debate or answering any questions or giving our opinions on these topics. It seems odd to me, and maybe to some of these other trainers, they're offering some particular celebrity trainers even money donated to the charity of their choice to just sit down and have a spirited debate about this, and or to show work by the purely positive trainer or the behaviorist on animal aggression. What are your results? What kind of results are you getting? What numbers of dogs are you rehabilitating? Because we sure would like to know.
Yeah, we've been doing it long enough now that we've followed some of our toughest customers to where the dog got old and passed away after having a huge bite history, seeing the rehabilitation, the dog living a happy life and stopping its aggressive behavior. So we know what we're getting done and having really great success with. Really proud of the fact that Landheim, we have never turned a dog away from training or rehabilitation, ever. We've never recommended that any animal ever be euthanized. That's an aversive that we just won't go there. That's somebody else's decision. So proud to say that about the whole company, and that we do that.
All right, until the next video.
God bless Bob Bailey.